So our approach, if they're using a lot of the face, MOI would be right immediately where we go.
Like how you say that, if they're terrible and can't hit the middle of the face, if that's you who struggles with putting and hitting the center of the putter, you might start with MOI.
We all have our struggles.
I'm here with my friend Eric. Eric, tell everybody what you do here. What's your title?
So I'm the director of golf science here at Ping. So I get to oversee all of our efforts to answer those fundamental research questions about how things work.
That's a title for a smart dude, Eric. Mm-hmm. Yep,
that's
true. Let's talk about MOI because you're much smarter than I am. So we've got 3 different putters here. These are all very different in the MOI and the amount of toe hang, to throw that out there. But talk about what you think putters are, the value in MOI for putters.
Yeah, so MOI, I mean, this company was really founded on MOI, right? Karsten was one of the fathers of introducing that in a modern putter design. Understanding how the placement of weight can influence performance. MOI plays probably the biggest role in preserving ball speed.
Right.
So if you don't hit it perfectly center, we want to preserve as much of that ball speed as possible. So as we move impacts across the face, typically you'll see that ball speed fall off. Right. The more forgiving or the higher MOI the club head, the more we get equivalent ball speed across the face.
Yep.
And so, that was something, again, Karsten introduced, and we're continuing to design putters with as high MOI as possible while balancing out all those other elements like alignment aids and shape and size that can influence players' performance and how they perceive where a putter's pointed. So for a given size of putter, we're always trying to maximize that moment of inertia to ensure we're preserving ball speed.
Okay, sounds good. So then are you suggesting, and you kind of alluded to this, but to be super clear, are you suggesting everybody needs to have like the highest MOI putter for the best performance?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of other variables at play that influence performance. And I think when you can balance out MOI with those other elements, and that's what putter fitting is all about. You do a lot of putter fittings. Mm-hmm. We do a ton here in the putting lab. And it's about balancing out these different variables. And for different players, you might gravitate toward putting more emphasis on MOI for one player, but for another, a shape or an alignment aid or an overall kind of balance of the club.
Right. How about for someone who has a problem with speed control? Do you tend to up the MOI as a starting point for someone like that?
Yeah, so first we kind of get into, well, is it impact location that's influencing that speed control, or is it actual just variations in speed? And so our approach, if they're using a lot of the face, MOI would be right immediately where we go.
Like how you say that, if they're terrible and can't hit the middle of the face, if that's you who struggles with putting and hitting the center of the putter, you might start with MOI.
We all have our struggles.
So you got high MOI putter there.
Right.
And then they start to fall off a little bit.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we have the Tine 4 here, and then we have an answer putter there. And so the MOIs actually are pretty similar between this Tine and that answer.
Okay.
Even though, it's like, okay, this is a deeper CG, it's kind of more of a mid-mallet.
Sure.
The way we've been able to distribute the mass in both of these give us a pretty similar overall forgiveness of these 2 putters. Now, you mentioned different stroke type.
Yeah.
So here we actually have something that's more, so this one's face balanced. So we tend to, all else being equal, put this in somebody's hands that doesn't have a lot of face rotation. Mm-hmm. This Tine 4 is one of our strong arc stroke type putters. So it's going to have a little more toe hang. Probably best, again, all things being equal, for somebody with a lot of face rotation, and that answer sits kind of in between. And that's really governed by where the shaft axis intersects the head relative to the center of mass of the model of the putter head.
Okay. So how about like miss tendencies? Do you tend to change putters based on just left or right bias that people have, tour players in particular?
We do, for sure. And so we kind of start, like, that first element that we look at is, okay, are they a lot of face rotation or little face rotation? That kind of puts us in one, area. So let's say they're kind of, they're in the middle. So an answer putter is maybe where we would start. And then we start talking about missed tendencies. And we did a bunch of research here. And then actually one of our brand ambassadors, engineering consultant, Sasha McKenzie up at Nova Scotia, he did some studies up there showing that as we go from something that's face balanced to something that maybe is a little more heel shafted, players will tend to deliver the heel shafted putter with a little bit more of an open face,
Right.
and the face balanced putter with more of a square or shut face.
And that story isn't really told enough. So MOI is really helpful for the distance a ball could travel.
Yep.
The face balancing can help you with the left-right tendency.
Correct.
The more toe hang you have, the more right bias you tend to be. And if you want to miss to the left or always miss to the right, face balance would be a good putter to try.
Yep.
Seem about right? Okay. How about loft, angle, and lie? So let's say someone like Lee Westwood comes in and wants to talk about lie angle with you.
Yeah. So loft and lie are kind of the two, real basic. When you think putter fitting, you think loft and lie. And so lie is, right, just looking at that angle between essentially the bottom of that putter and the shaft. And so somebody with their hands really low, you'd maybe want to go a little flatter, and someone with their hands high, a little more upright.
Right.
And so you mentioned Lee Westwood. He was somebody who came in, and typically you have players who are very sensitive to the lie angle in the sense that they will see that change and then adjust, and then others that are, their hands are where their hands are, and they're not going to adjust. So Lee was one who, when he came in for a putter fitting, we noticed his toe was a little up. And so it was like, well, hey, maybe we want to flatten that a little bit. And so, we go a degree flat, 2 degrees flat, 3 degrees flat, and that toe was still
keeps going
still
like
in the air.
this.
And so what was happening is, his hands just kept getting lower and lower, and he was adjusting. And so, he has a couple ping zing putters in the vault, and that has a design where the toes higher, it kind of slopes down as you move to the heel. And so that gave him a visual of that toe being up without the putter itself being, upright.
Yeah. So he's just accustomed to seeing that, and that's what he's looking for, and puts it down the same way every time.
And so, there's a bit of art in fitting, and so you're trying to allow that player to be as comfortable as possible with what they're looking at, so they can point it where they need to point it, and execute the stroke.
Okay.
As far as loft goes, that's going to influence your launch angle and your spin rate. So depending on both the player's hands at delivery, the rise angle, as well as typical playing conditions, you're going to maybe add loft or subtract loft to get that ball rolling. And I think what we've seen a lot is that, yes, there's an element of some speed control and repeatability, but it's maybe not as big as you would expect. But it definitely influences a player's perception of quality of roll. So we've all maybe had that experience where you kind of hear it go and it's not a very comforting feeling compared to where you hit that ball and it's just, you don't hear anything and you could tell it's just, you see that line going end over end. And so I think there's an element of loft that's performance based, but a lot of it ends up coming into what we experience when we hear that ball interacting with the turf when we hit that putt. So getting the loft in that happy window where the player's hearing something that's building confidence, as well as getting that ball launching and rolling. Those things are the two that we're really focused on.
So then start with the background of the question. So you hit a ball, it's got some loft. The ball sits down in the ground a little bit anyway. So that loft enables the ball to come out of the little tiny hole that it's in and start rolling pretty soon. Does every tour player have almost the same launch conditions, or are they looking for the same, or does it change from player to player and then they just want to use, like at the tour level, whatever they're accustomed to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we have a fair amount of variability in the lofts that our different tour players are using. You're very rarely going to have a loft that a player is delivering where that dynamic loft, or so the loft at delivery versus the loft on the putter, is actually pointing down toward the ground.
Right. That would make no sense to drive it.
Because you'd be driving it right into that nest, right? So you talked about that kind of ball sitting in a little nest of grass.
Yeah.
And so, ideally you're getting that ball out of that indentation and rolling end over end. And so there's a fair amount of variability in the lofts that we see on our tour players. And why that depends on their delivery, and obviously you get to arm lock, and all of a sudden we're putting a lot of loft on there because there's a lot of forward press. Okay,
so to someone who's looking to get a putter fitting, they don't have access to your lab and hundreds of putters on the wall. When someone just picks up a putter for the first time, what would you tell them to kind of look for?
Yeah, so I think initially I would, if possible, get your stroke measured, get eye ping. It could walk you through a fitting and kind of go, okay, here are the things I can guide you to this section.
Yeah,
and
it's
this is what
always
you
the
should
best
look
way to
at.
go is start with a putter fitting, just like club fitting and drivers.
Yeah.
Very few people would buy a driver off the rack. Your putter shouldn't really be the same way. But if you had to,
Yeah.
there are some things you could look for.
Yeah, so I think alignment preferences. So I think thinking through, okay, am I somebody who doesn't want a lot of busyness on my putter? Am I somebody who likes ball width alignment lines? Am I somebody who likes a long line going from front to back? Those are things that you can explore.
Yep.
Go into the putter corral and your local retailer, and you can kind of explore when you put those things down. Which ones do you feel most confident that? Oh, I know where this putter face is pointing. I think that's one thing definitely to look at right away. I think the feel and balance when you pick up a putter, and that can be influenced by grip, can influenced by CG depth. So the depth of the CG on the putter in your hand is much different than this hardwood here.
Sure.
And that's going to influence that feel during the stroke. And then just roll some putts, right? And understand, okay, do I have a tendency with this one, and what's my comfort level?
Yeah. So maybe you can get 25, 30% of the way there through some trial and error and some basic understanding of what a putter looks like. Best way to do it, probably get measured like you do here all the time.
I would definitely,
With a pro.
It's a pretty easy thing to, get a bit of a fitting and a bit of insight.
Yeah.
And again, you could download an app a lot of times and do that, or interact with local retailers. So.
And most like GOLFTEC putting lessons, putter fittings turn into putting lessons, because it's pretty easy to give somebody just a little bit of advice after they hit a couple putts to help get them on the right way. So it's a good investment into your game just to get a putter fitting at your local GOLFTEC preferably, because that's what our professional coaches do. Thanks for the
100%.
time, as always.
Of course. Pleasure.